In 1859, the most powerful solar storm in recorded history swept radiation all over the Earth. It caused fires at telegraph stations, gave operators electric shocks, and even caused auroras as far south as Mexico. But in 1859, there was no internet, no television, and not even any radio. When a superstorm returns with our modern technology, humanity will be left devastated, and countries all over the world could be without the internet for weeks or even months. There's even good reason to believe it may wreak havoc in the next couple of years. But this is just scratching the surface. How will we handle the next superstorm and the resulting internet apocalypse? To fully understand the impact a superstorm will cause today, it's important to get a few more details about that event from 1859, which actually has a name, the Carrington Event. It was named after Richard Carrington, an amateur astronomer who studied the event before it hit Earth, which was unprecedented at the time. He even sketched the first recorded solar flare by hand. He recognized the Sun-Earth connection, but even he couldn't predict how insane this event would really be. So how did it even happen? Well, the Sun goes through cycles of intensity, about 11 years long, from solar minimum to solar maximum. This determines the frequency in which the Sun shoots out huge masses of plasma and magnetic field, called coronal mass ejections, or CMEs. During solar minimum, it's only about 1 every 5 days, but in solar maximum, it's roughly 3 CMEs every single day. Even though the Sun is 93 million miles away, 3 CMEs a day make it a scary possibility to hit the Earth. And this is exactly what happened in 1859. Just a few months before solar maximum, a massive CME broke through the Earth's protective layer and caused a huge geomagnetic storm. Remember, this was before any wireless communication, but we did have electricity and telegraph stations to send messages worldwide, and they were left in complete disarray. The induced currents overloaded our grids, resulting in showers of sparks, shocking operators and catching many stations on fire. After the initial shock, some operators were able to transmit telegrams without being plugged in at all, using only the current generated in the air from the storm itself. Pause here if you'd like to read their conversation. But that's not all. The huge influx of charged particles from the Sun also resulted in auroras all across the Earth, and really stretched the definition of the so-called Northern Lights, as they were found as far south as Mexico and Hawaii. And the auroras were so bright that in the Rocky Mountains, they awoke gold miners in the middle of the night who thought it was morning and started to prepare breakfast. Another gold miner, this one in Australia, recounted, "Myself and 2 mates looking out the tent saw a great reflection at about 7 o'clock p.m., and in about half an hour, a scene of almost unspeakable beauty presented itself. Lights of every imaginable color were issuing from the southern heavens, one color fading away only to give place to another, if possible more beautiful than the last. It was a sight never to be forgotten." But what would this event look like in the modern day? Well, we've had many geomagnetic storms, even some widespread auroras as recent as late February 2023, but a storm of 1859 levels would require some special circumstances, like another solar maximum. Unfortunately for us, that's thought to be sometime in the next 2 years. It's looking more and more likely to happen by the day, and we are not prepared. We'll go over the positives at the end of the video, but for now, here's some of what could go wrong. Firstly, just like in 1859, the induced currents would overload our power grids and cause widespread power outages. Some areas with good infrastructure could have their power back quickly, but poorer countries, and areas like Texas in the US, known for many recent issues with their power grid, could be without power for weeks or even months, especially if the damage is severe. Combine this with any other weather event, like extreme cold, and millions could be in a dire situation. While an influx of charged particles can create beautiful auroras, it can also be disastrous for our satellite and radio communications. The ionization of the upper atmosphere can create an environment that is more reflective to radio waves, interfering with communication systems used by many emergency services. And the orbiting satellites that transmit GPS signals worldwide would experience disruption and malfunction, causing errors in location and timing data. This would impact maritime travel and ground transportation globally. The electrically conductive environment in the air would make its way through any conductive surfaces, like airplanes in the sky. Any airplane that may be up in the air during the event could go haywire, and possibly even lead to loss of control of the aircraft. Manned spacecraft also wouldn't be immune. In fact, they would be the most susceptible. Objects in space, like the International Space Station, would be totally exposed, and the safety of any astronaut on board would be put in complete jeopardy. There's also the immense economic impact to consider. With halts to the supply chain, loss of productivity, impacts to emergency services, and fires forming all around, unbelievable sums of money would essentially be thrown into the gutter. Some estimates for the impact to the US put it at a loss of $40 billion every day, and other countries, like those that rely on tourism, would lose much more, relatively speaking. Remember all of the issues of the COVID-19 pandemic? Now just imagine another black swan event, this one more sudden and devastating, and what it would take to recover from without proper preparation. But this could really just be the start of our issues. What would it look like if all of this also resulted in our internet being down for weeks or months? Welcome to the Internet Apocalypse. It should come as no surprise to anyone that we've become totally reliant on the internet. But while many power grids are designed to mitigate the effects of a CME, as they've been around for longer, the fresh-faced internet wasn't built with the same concerns in mind. Yes, the damaged satellites would be a cause for concern, but the more pressing concern comes in the form of undersea cables. These cables travel amazing distances and have repeaters to boost their signals at intervals of every 30 to 90 miles. All of these repeaters are vulnerable to geomagnetic storms, and if even one goes down, it could make an entire cable useless. The longer the cable, the more vulnerable it is, which is bad news for those who live in North America. Not only are higher latitudes more at risk of damage, but the cables that connect North America to the rest of the world are by far the longest. Looking at this map, it should be easy to understand why areas like Europe and Asia are less vulnerable than areas like the United States. Longer cables would also mean longer periods of time to repair, which is why some places could be without the internet for perhaps months at a time. So you may have to say goodbye to memes, online shopping, food delivery apps, and the much more important aspects, like talking to family members in other countries, online banking, or even just access to information. But as dystopian as this superstorm could be, there's a lot of reason to stay optimistic. For one, the shorter, underground fiber optic cables connecting countries locally are not vulnerable and would not be affected. That means communications could still stay up in most countries within the country itself. Also, CMEs are being taken more seriously by the day, and efforts are currently underway to improve our ability to predict and mitigate the impacts for all areas potentially affected. Perhaps most importantly, these solar events take time to reach Earth. Many take days, but even in the worst case, we would have several hours to prepare for the event, meaning we should take all needed measures, like ensuring no airplanes take to the sky. So yes, when the next superstorm comes, there will be global impacts, but will it be the end of the world? Not a chance. So let's make sure to take it all in stride, set some candles aside, and stay cozious.